All right, we'll be getting started in just a couple minutes here. Thank you so much for joining a little bit early. If you're here, if you want to say hello to me in the chat box, that'd be great. I'd love to know who's joined us today. Jackie Ann, welcome. Oh, Mary and Livonia, Ray Sweeney, welcome. Glad to have you all here. Chelsea, welcome. Let's see, Heidi and Ypsilanti, that's just down the way from me. Welcome aboard. Aberhead, welcome. Watching from Oregon, wow, I wondered how far we'd get with this. This was, of course, originally scheduled to be an event, and like so many in-person events, it's had to be shifted live stream. So um, we will see. I'm curious to see how that adjusts our audience. Up in Canada, Dave in Iowa. Wow, all right. International here, that's pretty exciting. Looks like about 30 seconds or so when we're going to get started. Teresa in Dearborn. All right, we have the 10-second countdown here. Here we go, folks. Oh, there we go. All right. Well, welcome aboard, everyone, to the inaugural live stream Rain Gardens 101 event. I'm going to be your host today, Matthew Bertrand. I'm the restoration coordinator and landscape designer for Friends of the Rouge. And I am broadcasting to you today live from an undisclosed location. It is most definitely not my bathroom. Don't get any ideas about that. I certainly wouldn't host something in my bathroom as the only space that my charming, angelic 1 and 4 year old daughters would not be able to shriek so loudly to destroy the live stream. I'm certainly not in the bathroom. We are in an undisclosed location. Welcome. I'm so glad that you can all join today. I hope you're all safe and healthy and staying home. And for those of you who are feeling ill, I'm so glad that you're able to join. I hope and wish you and your families speedy recoveries. I'm glad you all could join us today, especially because nature is open. It's one of the few things that is open right now. And what we'll discuss today through Rain Gardens 101 is a wonderful way to get you outside and to keep you healthy, both emotionally and physically. So nature is open, and I think we're going to have a good time today. All right, with that, I'm going to get the presentation component started here. So here we go, Rain Gardens 101, Get Your Lawn a Job. The event today was sponsored by a few folks, so I'd like to get started just by recognizing them. Certainly, Friends of the Rouge has made this event possible. Also, support from the Master Rain Gardener Training Program, Washington County Water Resources, and most especially from the Dearborn Public Library. The Dearborn Public Library's NEA Big Reads program is supporting this today. It's a program of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. The Big Read aims to broaden understanding of our world, communities, and ourselves through sharing the joy of a good book. For a fourth time, Dearborn Public Library is one of 75 organizations nationwide that received this grant to host an NEA Big Read program in their community. This year's NEA Big Read Dearborn is themed The World is Your Lab, focusing on Hope Jaron's science memoir, Lab Girl, and presenting programs regarding science and nature. To see what other online programs are happening in April, please visit bigreaddearborn.org or dearbornlibrary.org or connect on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. So thank you to all these organizations for their support to make this happen today. A little bit about Friends of the Rouge before we get any farther. The Rouge River watershed, for those of you especially that are joining us from far away, is located in southeast Michigan. You can see it highlighted in white on the map here. We're about 480 square miles, 1.3 million people that live in the watershed. This is one of the most urbanized watersheds in the entire country. You can see in the red on that map urban areas in the state of Michigan. And the Rouge has come a long ways. It's one of the rivers that caught fire just about 50 years ago that helped spark modern environmental consciousness, that helped trigger the very first Earth Day. With work from Friends of the Rouge and all of our partners, um, the river has come so far. Today, we've been hosting kayak trips, canoe trips in the river for about 10 years now. We bring thousands of people out to explore the river every year, students across the area through their schools, as well as through our river monitoring programs. We also work to restore the river. Our largest annual event, Rouge Rescue, brings 2,000 people out every year. This is one of the largest river cleanups in the state of Michigan and indeed the country. It's a lot of great work. A few things I'm going to share with you about Friends of the Rouge. We're really proud of the Lower Rouge Water Trail. The river has come so far that, yes, we are opening a water trail along the lower branch, 27 miles of paddling adventure for you and your family to enjoy. I want to share a few other online activities coming up with Friends of the Rouge, just so you can stay engaged. I want to make sure you know about our Nature is Open campaign. We're inviting you to get outside, whether it's just on your street, walking your block, or to a nearby natural area, and share your pictures of your adventure so we can encourage your friends and neighbors to get outside as well, so we can all stay healthy. I also want to let you know Rouge Rescue this year is transforming. We can't hold it like we always have, so we're going to be launching starting this next week an online game that you can play at home and in your community to engage in real Rouge Rescue activities in competition with your friends and neighbors. And you can get started by submitting your favorite animal mascots through our website, therouge.org/Rouge Rescue, to get in on the game. All right, with that, I'm going to get started with the event itself. So I want to get a sense for what brought you here today. I'm going to do this through a poll, and I'm going to open it right now. So let's see, publish the poll. So did you come here because of flooding issues, whether in your streets, your home, you want to try to solve? Did you come to try to build habitat for birds, butterflies, and other pollinators? Did you come because you want to support recreation on your Rouge River, whether through canoeing, kayaking, or just scenic hiking? Or lastly, did you come because you want to invest in a future of wild spaces for our next generation to enjoy? So these are our four options I'd like to give to you. So we'll take a moment. I see 60 people who filled out the poll. Fill out the poll. Leave it open for maybe another 20 seconds or so here, and then I'll pause it and we'll move on. So what brought you here today? Sorry for those of you who are having a hard time with this question. Maybe you want to pick more than one, but unfortunately, you're going to have to pick one today. Just one. Let's see. It looks like we've got about 50 responses. I'm going to close the poll here in just a sec, so get yours in. All right, I'm showing those results now. You can see it looks like most people are here today because they want to help those birds, bees, and butterflies. A few people that want to protect against flooding, a little bit the other things. The good news today is with a rain garden, you don't actually have to pick. A rain garden does all of these things. That's why we're so excited to share with you about rain gardens today. So you can work towards all of these goals simultaneously with a rain garden. All right, wonderful. All right, moving ahead here now. So Rain Gardens 101, get your lawn a job. Four things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about challenges to our river, to our communities. We're going to talk about how to get your lawn a job, soaking up the rain to solve those challenges. We're going to talk about lawns to life with rain gardens. And then lastly, your next steps, how you can get rain smart at home, how you can take this home. All right, and I've got a few blatant teasers for you before we get too much farther. So we did advertise door prizes today, which is a little hard when we're all remote, but we're going to do the best we can with it. We've got a digital coach consultation and a rain barrel as our prizes today. At the very end of today's event, you will get a link to an evaluation, and as a part of that evaluation, you'll get entered into the door prize drawing. And lastly, I want to open up for you right now. As a part of today's event, we're actually going to do a live demo on somebody's home. And so I want to give you a chance. If you would like to be the person whose home we demo, please feel free to enter your address into the prompt that should be coming up any minute now. It will be kept private, or at least, all the submissions will be private except for the one that we highlight. So if you're uncomfortable sharing your address, please don't put it in there. But if any one of you would like to have your home featured today who lives in the Rouge, I'd like it to be in the Rouge, please go ahead and put your address into the prompt that came up. All right. We will get to that in a little bit. So moving ahead now, so challenges. So here is a picture from the Arbor Day Foundation that I love because it really encapsulates all the challenges we're dealing with. What I would love to have you all do is to type into the comment box what you see in this picture. What are some of the challenges that you see depicted in this image? And while you're typing, I see a question. Do I need to ask my city for permission to install a rain garden? The Rouge has 48 communities, and so really you should be checking in with your local community. The vast majority of them, though, don't require permission to install a rain garden on your property. In fact, most communities strongly encourage it because your efforts solve so many problems. If you're building a rain garden right next to the road, that's typically community property, and those spaces you need to get permission from. All right. I don't see anyone entering in problems that they see in this today. There we go. Hard surface concrete water runoff from Chelsea. Yep. Flooding, runoff from parking lots. Yep. Lots of cement. Yeah. All of these hard surfaces, especially developed across this image, the water doesn't soak anymore into the ground anymore like it used to. And so it runs off and it creates some of these flooding problems. Other problems on here, not a lot of tree cover actually. Emerald ash borer in the state of Michigan and beyond devastated much of our urban tree canopy cover going back several decades. And that loss of tree canopy cover has been a huge problem. Yep, somebody pointed out very few trees there. Let's see what else. Somebody pointed out fertilizer off of all these lawns. Most of what you see growing here is lawn, which is typically heavily fertilized and creates water quality problems. Absolutely. No green roofs. Somebody pointed out, yeah, those roofs are hard surfaces. It's those hard surfaces that are the issue. And pollution, yeah, somebody pointed out pollution. So a lot of folks will point to factories as being the major source of pollution problems in the river, and certainly historically in the Rouge, that was the issue. But owing to the Clean Water Act in the 70s, much of the industrial pollution has been cleaned up. So actually, most of the pollution issues that get into our rivers that make them run dirty are from all of us. The brakes from our cars as they wear out, the rubber from our tires, the oils from our cars that drip, all of that ends up getting washed together, concentrating into the river and running off. So that's one of our major sources of pollution. So all these hard surfaces and the pollutants that come with it are the problems that we're dealing. And you can see in this picture lots of flooded backyards. I hear from people all across Southeast Michigan about flooding issues in their backyards and threats to their property. And yes, somebody just pointed out a lack of animal habitat is another issue. There's not a lot of habitat for wildlife. These are spaces for people here, not spaces that we're sharing. All right, I'm going to show you now. Here is a picture of the solution, or a solution at the very least, that we're working to get at. So maybe write what you see here. What changed now in your comment box? Take a look at this. I'm going to go back once. There was the before and forward. There's the after, what we're striving for here. So what are the changes that you see in this, going from the before to the after? All right, I'm going to point out a couple while we're waiting for folks to start commenting in. Obviously, the tree canopy cover, lots more trees planted in here. This is showing a restoration of tree canopy cover. We want to get to at least 40% tree canopy cover. That's the goal that most communities set for tree canopy to help solve some of these problems. Yeah, lots of trees. There are also a number of other things happening here. Rain gardens. Many of these homes have rain gardens in them. Many of the parking lot spaces now have bioretention islands, basically rain gardens in the parking areas. There are hard surfaces that let the water soak through now. You can see access to the river restored, down here, people are celebrating this river with a boardwalk and a pathway along the river there. You can see people out enjoying the river again. It's running clean because all of these practices are soaking up that water before it floods and pollutes the river itself. So this is an example of a community that is celebrating its water, that's making its water a part of its community, and that's really getting ahead of the climate change issues that we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be seeing more intense rains moving forward. We're going to be seeing hotter communities. All this tree cover is reducing temperatures, making these communities more livable spaces for us to enjoy. So lots of great things happening here. This looks like a lot, right? You go back, you see what's happening originally, where we're at now, and where we're trying to get to. That looks like a lot. But what I'd like you to really focus in on is just one home here, right? We all are working within our homes as being the place that we can most control. And when you focus in on that one home, take a look. There's not a whole lot that had to happen at that home, right? You see a couple trees planted, you see a rain garden on the southern end of this home. It's not a huge lift for each of us to do our part. And when we all do our part, it adds up to an enormous difference. In the Rouge, 50% of the land area that drains to the Rouge is single family homes. Single family homes. So all of us together, when we take these steps at our home, it adds up to a huge impact. Friends of the Rouge has set the goal of 1,000 rain gardens and 6,000 rain barrels by 2025 to help us make this happen here in Southeast Michigan. All right, moving forward now. So we've talked about the challenge, we've talked about the solution. Now we're going to talk about how we actually make it happen, how to get your lawn a job, how to start soaking up that rain. We're going to step through some basic practices. This is kind of prepping you for rain gardens to come is really one of the best practices. We're going to talk about healthy lawn care. We're going to talk about downspout disconnections for practices. We're going to talk about technologies, rain barrels, dry wells, permeable pavers, trees. I see somebody asking about retention ponds, also a great strategy, but one that's typically a community effort more than an individual effort. So something that your community should be working towards or your developers working towards. So let's see, moving ahead, we're going to shift into healthy lawn care. And I'm not going to go too deep into this. Your local extension service, Michigan State University Extension or beyond, has an immense amount of resources about how to do all these things. But the whole point of healthy lawn care is that when your lawn is healthier, then it's going to soak up the rain better. So if you can use a mulching lawnmower, especially mulch those leaves into your yard every year, you're saving time and effort, and you're also adding organic matter, free fertilizer to your lawn that helps that lawn be healthier, require less fertilizer, and soak up the rain all the better. Mowing practices. If you let your lawn get a little taller, 3 inches before you start mowing it, the roots get comparably longer as well. Those deeper roots mean that the grass is healthier through the heat of the summertime and stays greener, and it also soaks that rain up better. Lastly, aeration. Plug aeration, especially where it's popping pieces of soil out of the ground. That opens up your grass to allow the water to soak in. It allows the fertilizers actually to better get in there as well. It lets the roots establish better in the lawn as well. So all these practices together make your lawn more of a sponge that ends up soaking up the rain better, and it lets it so less fertilizers running off into our waterways. And when we do that, when we make our lawn a sponge, we can shift to downspout disconnections as an incredibly powerful and so easy an activity. This is showing what not to do right here. You can see this downspout. Somebody, wanted to get that water away, so they sent it onto their driveway apron there. Here in Michigan, oh, yikes. That is a slip hazard in the wintertime. That is dangerous for especially folks walking in our communities, slipping on that ice. That's not a good thing. It also is flooding people downstream. When we send that water straight onto our driveway aprons and into our stormwater systems, it's flooding people downstream. Or for those of us that lived in combined sewer systems, like much of Detroit, elsewhere in the metro area, oftentimes these downspouts go straight into the sewer system. That also causes flooding, it causes basement backups, and it causes combined sewer overflows. So what we want to do instead is we want to send that water onto our lawn that we just made a sponge. That's going to make us do the happy dance. On the right here, you'll see an example of a really robust way to do it, an underground pipe to a pop-up emitter, getting that water 10 feet or more away from our house. That helps to protect our foundations. It helps protect our property as well, getting that water away from our homes. So this is a simple practice that anyone can do this year easily to start soaking up the rain to get that lawn a job. So those are the practices that we're focusing on. Now I'm going to move on to the technologies. Rain barrels, dry wells, permeable pavers, trees. Really? I have lumped trees in as a technology, and then we'll get the rain gardens. So first off, rain barrels. We set the goal of 6,000 rain barrels for the Rouge. 6,000 rain barrels adds up to about 300,000 gallons of rain every time it rains that we can be capturing in our homes. We're going to save water and save money by doing that. Rather than paying money to get water pumped to our homes, which is a huge expense in many of the homes here in Southeast Michigan, we can get free rainwater to water our gardens to save some money. There are an incredible number of styles of rain gardens available, from the upcycled rain barrels shown on the top right. There are oak rain barrels. You got to watch out to make sure that they hold water. Some are decorative, but there are functional oak rain barrels that look beautiful. And then there are an incredible variety of manufactured plastic rain barrels, every shape and color you can imagine available. So rain barrels of all kinds. And this year, Friends of the Rouge is going to be holding a rain barrel sale. Our barrels are starting at $69 for upcycled barrels. We're pricing these as competitively as we can because we want to bring in as many as possible. We're trying to hit that 6,000 rain barrels by 2025. That's about 1,000 rain barrels a year we're looking at bringing in. So we're pricing these as low as we can. Great way for you to start doing your part today. Next, for those of you that are not interested in a rain barrel, dry well is a great way to go. It's basically a rain barrel that's underground. That 50-gallon barrel that's underground ends up sending the water into the groundwater all the time. So it works even in the most lawn-centric of communities as a way to get your lawn really soaking up that water. Much more expensive than a rain barrel, though. A rain barrel is a much more affordable way to go. But this is also a great strategy for solving difficult situations, and especially for those of you that have clay soils or that are in really tight areas. This helps to maximize your footprint, your infiltration for your footprint. Next, I want to show you great new technologies that are available. These are more expensive. So they're the kind of things when your driveway is failing, that might be a good time to look at this. This is showing permeable pavers here in the top left. You can see that this driveway is sloped back towards the house, which is a recipe for disaster. So these permeable pavers, which actually let the water soak through the hard surface, can often be a great solution for really tough situations. They look great. They last twice as long. So even though they're more expensive, they actually can be cheaper for the life cycle of the material. There are also permeable concretes available, permeable asphalts available, all different shapes and sizes of permeable pavers, and there are even things called grass paves and gravel paves that are grass or gravel textures that let them soak through very, very well. I see somebody asking about which is better, dry well or rain barrel. Both work well for slightly different purposes. So it's really going to be what's most appropriate for you. Rain barrels are cheaper. Dry wells are much more expensive, but can be a little bit more robust and effective. Rain barrels are the best place to start, though. All right, moving ahead. Trees a solution. We showed in that before and after picture earlier the incredible power of trees. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is today. It's going to take a few years to really get going to reach its maximum benefit, but especially for those of you in hard clay soils. These trees do an incredible job preventing the water from even hitting the ground. The first quarter inch of rain typically gets caught in the tree canopy. And then the roots on those trees send the water deep underground. Those trees are soaking up the water like crazy. The trees are also lowering the temperature of your home by shading your home, especially from that western and the northern sun. It can really help save you money on your cooling bills in the summertime. They also actually lower the ambient temperature. Communities that have high tree cover can be on average 5 to 10 degrees cooler in the summertime. So planting trees is an incredible solution, and it's very affordable. You can buy small tree stock for very, very little money. Get started on that today. It's a great strategy. All right, moving ahead, summing it all together. So putting this picture here from Montgomery County's Rainscape program shows all of these solutions added up. It adds a few extras. You can see a green roof on top of the drive, permeable paver driveway, grass pave right here. It's got a rain guard. It's got a rain barrel. It also has a conservation landscape. For those of you that want to support habitat especially, adding additional native plant space is a great way to do it. You don't just have to have a rain garden. All right, so I'm going to do another poll for you all now. This is going to be a poll about which practice is going to make the most sense for you today. That healthy lawn care, downspout disconnect, the rain barrel or dry well, tree planting, or if you're tired of hearing me talking about these other things and you want me to get to the rain gardens already, you can vote for that. So the poll is open. I'm going to leave it open for a sec, and I'll see if there's any questions that I can answer while you're filling out what looks best for you to start. And by all means, I encourage you to do all of these things. Don't just stop at one, but what looks like the easiest one for you to get started with today. Let's see, best trees for soaking up water. So, gosh, I have not seen a performance study on trees that are going to be best for soaking up the water. At the end of the day, I like to compare a tree versus no tree. Any tree compared to no tree at all is going to be incredibly good for soaking up that rain. So it's really going to be your best bet. There might be other resources available online. Another question, let's see, best trees that won't overwhelm an average royal oak home, but still soak up the water. You want to be very careful about your tree selection to make sure at its mature size, it's going to fit within the space that you planted. So there are plenty of medium trees. Oh, and I see one of my colleagues is answering that question, which is wonderful. Plenty of medium trees that will fit within tight spaces. So just watch the growth forms and habits for the long term of the tree to make sure it fits in. Let's see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show the results now in the poll. Looks like most of you want me to get to the rain gardens. That gratifies me. There's nothing I like talking about more than rain gardens. So I appreciate that vote of confidence. See a lot of folks looking at rain barrels, healthy lawn care, and tree planting as well. Yes, I see somebody pointing out don't plant the trees too close to the foundations. I see so many homes that have trees growing so close to the homes. That is dangerous for the tree, for the life cycle of the homes. The trees eventually fall over, they drop limbs at times. You don't want to plant that tree too close to the home. You don't want a tree with an aggressive root system that's going to crack the foundation. Especially silver maples are notorious for that. Many communities don't allow them to be to be planted anymore. All right, moving ahead. We're going to shift into the first exercise now. So I'm going to take a look at the questions and see if anybody submitted an address to me that I can with. All right, we will do our first demo. And I'm going to ask you all to bear with me on this. This is our first time ever doing this live stream approach. And this will be my first time demo live in front of you all. So we will see how it goes. But I think it should be a good time. So I got my first edition 703 Ashton Woods in Canton. Let's take a look and see what we have here. I'm going to do my best to go with this one. Oh, yeah, it's going to be a great home to work. Zoom in on this home. So it's Canton, Michigan. Typically, Canton communities have a whole lot of clay. It's called Canton clay. Canton tends to be a tough community to work in as a result of that. Canton is also known for pretty pristine lawns. It's definitely a community that values its lawn. We built a few rain gardens in the Canton area over the years. Let's copy that. Oops. We built a few rain gardens in the Canton area over the years, and most of the folks that we've worked with there have been especially concerned about the front yard aesthetics. And so we'll get to that at some point here. Here I see what's going on. All right, here we go. So here is our home demo. Zoom in on it a little bit. A little bit bigger, fill in this space. There we go. All right. Oh, actually, and I did want to show you all one thing before I did that. So when you right click on these Google Maps, you can do a measure distance. I want to mark out, for scale's sake, a 10-foot gap there, and that's going to help us when we get to our design. And what I'm going to be showing you today is basically a process that you can use to kind of step through and figure out what your options are at your homes. Options at your home to be building a rain garden. Here we go. There we go. This time, get it, and we're going to get that 10-foot scale in there. There we go. Okay. All right, so the first thing I want to show is that 10-foot gap, right? So let's see, we are going to get our paint bucket. Go. All right, I am going to get, let's see. So showing about a 10-foot gap around the home here. So we want to keep our rain gardens about 10 feet away from our homes. Is really going to be the way we want to go with rain gardens. There go. So that's showing about that 10-foot gap. I'm going to make it partially opaque so we can see through it. The next thing I want us to be aware of is going to be where our downspouts are located. So to do an inventory on your downspouts. So we're going to get into our tree view here. Let's see if this, let's see. Get at the right home. So I think this right here. So you can zoom in, got downspouts coming down. For the purposes of this demonstration here, I'm not going to be precise about it, but I just wanted to show you the power of these tools to be able to identify really essential information. So I'm going to just highlight for you places where typically you might find a downspout. And as you're thinking about your own property, it's very important for your site analysis to have a sense for where your downspouts are. So there we go, we've got those downspouts marked out there. So we've got a sense now for our 10-foot zone away from our house where we don't want to have our rain gardens, and we've got identified our downspout locations for the home. So this is going to be our initial thought process as we're looking ahead to our rain gardens. So I'm going to step away from this now. We're going to get a little bit more into rain gardens, and we're going to come back to this demo and take further action. All right, so moving ahead now. All right, so lawns to like with rain gardens. We talked about strategies that we can use to soak up the rain. We're going to get to the ultimate strategy now, the rain garden, which soaks up the rain and it solves so many other problems. It creates habitat for birds, butterflies, and pollinators. Rain gardens go very, very well with tree planting to provide all those benefits of trees. Rain gardens are an incredibly powerful solution. As we get into rain gardens, we're going to talk about 5 things today. We're going to talk about an overview of what a rain garden is. We're going to talk about rain gardens, sizing rain gardens, digging rain gardens, and planting rain gardens. And for all of these elements here, the thing I want you to keep in mind especially is that within our time today, you're not going to become an expert on any one of these things. You're probably going to have to do more research on each of these pieces, but I'm going to provide you the resources you need to find out more information. My goal today is for you to get a rough concept in your head, a schema for how to go about tackling these different things so that you feel comfortable. You have a roadmap in your head for how to move forward with a rain garden. So that's my goal today. So overview of a rain garden. So our rain garden efforts here are part of the Rain Smart program, 1,000 rain gardens for the Rouge. That's our goal by 2025. And in showing you this beautiful backyard here, I'd actually like to play a little game with you. It's called Guess the Rain Garden. What part of this design professional landscape is the rain garden? Go ahead and type your guesses in the comment box if you'd like. I'll give you all 15 seconds to think about it, and then I will let you know the answer to it. So what part of this backyard space is the rain garden? Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. All right. So there are actually, trick question, 2 rain gardens in this picture here. There is a rain garden in the form space between the paving stones. Somebody said all of it. Well, you know, all your garden is going to be helping to soak up the rain to some degree. But this section right here in the foreground middle, it's got that grassy texture. That's 100% native umbrella sedge. And then in the back, in the top right, there's another rain garden. So there's 2 rain gardens built in here. And they're designed to pair very nicely. They have a complementary planting pattern together. And as you can see, they fit beautifully into this more traditional design garden space. So rain gardens can really be a part of any rain garden. Not somebody guessed the hosta garden. I have heard reference that some hostas can work in rain gardens, but in this case, the sedges are the primary rain garden plants in use. So what's a rain garden? Rain garden is really, it's a garden like any other, right? It's a hole in the ground. It's a glorified hole in the ground that we send water to. Boom, done, end of presentation, we can all go home. All right, there's a little more complexity to it. It's not just digging a hole and walking about your merry way. The complexity to a rain garden comes in the sizing. We want to make sure that it drains within 24 to 48 hours. We want to make sure it looks great and the plants survive. That's the only trick to it, really. But it's really a shallow space, about 3 to 6 inches deep, that soaks up the rain that we send water to. So here's a schematic that shows roughly how a rain garden works. So we're taking that roof water through our gutter downspouts. We're sending it to that really shallow saucer. Saucer is a good way to think about it. 3 to 6 inches deep at ponds for 24 to 48 hours, and then it soaks into the ground. I'm going to do another poll for you now. And it's going to be the poll is going to be, what's your biggest obstacle to a rain garden? So based on what you know about a rain garden now, some of you are going to be coming in with no knowledge. Some of you are going to know a ton about rain gardens. What is the obstacle that you see as being your greatest concern? So need to learn how to do it right. So you're here for the information, whether it's the potential cost of a rain garden, whether you're concerned about what your neighbors will think, or whether you yourself will like it. Those are some of the questions, the possible concerns that you might have coming in here. Maybe you don't have any concerns. Maybe you know it's the right thing for you and you're just here for a pep talk. That's great. I'm hearing some comments, and I got a message from my colleagues. The sound is going in and out. You know, the issue with the internet these days, right, is everybody's using it simultaneously. So I hope you'll bear with us as we do the best we can today. And I'll do my best to make sure I'm doing my part with the sound. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show the results now. I'm very gratified to see that most people just need to learn how to do it right. Hopefully today's presentation is going to help you get there. Some concerns about cost, not very many concerns about the neighbors will think. Interestingly, though, actually most research suggests that concerns about the neighbors is actually the #1 obstacle for people. And I'm glad to see not many people think that they're not sure they're going to like it. All right, so now we've got a sense. Oh, I see a few other concerns about plants to use, small city lots. Yep, those are obstacles as well. We'll do our best to work through those today. All right. So let's see. Somebody I see asked about whether or not you can create a rain garden in clay. The internet will tell you you cannot create a rain garden in clay. The internet is wrong. You can create rain gardens in clay. Many other communities elsewhere in the country don't have to deal with the clay that Michiganders oftentimes have to deal with. In the southeast Michigan area, Washtenaw County and Friends of the Rouge have been building rain gardens for 10 to 15 years on landscapes with clay soils, and they do great. We'll talk today about what you have to do differently in clay to make it work, but clay is not an obstacle to a rain garden. All right, I'm going to show you a few sample rain gardens that Friends of the Rouge has installed in the last few years, just to give you a bit of a better sense for what they look like. So this is the Plymouth Municipal Yard beforehand. The municipal yard had about a 6,000 square foot area of roof that drained down into this front area that was causing flooding issues, and it was severely icy in the wintertime, creating hazards for the visitors to the municipal yard. And I'm sure you will agree it also could have looked just a little bit more attractive. So they decided to partner with Friends of the Rouge to build a rain garden. Here is the after. So we ripped up about 1,000 square foot of asphalt, and we planted it with attractive species, very typical to the Plymouth area, the backdrop of yews, very commonly used, overused, perhaps used in the Plymouth area. The bottom of the basin, which you can't see, is a majority little blue stem, so it's got a great grassy texture. This is largely a textural garden designed to soften the entryway to the garden, and it soaks up over 6,000 gallons of rain every time it rains. This garden was built on heavily sandy soil. It soaks in about 4 hours. This garden is incredibly productive. All right, next example of a rain garden. This is a Plymouth Township residence. Here's the before. This is a garden on the heaviest of clay soils. They're not too far from Tonquish Creek, a tributary to the Rouge, and they had issues with incredibly wet lawn, hard to mow. Their water table is relatively high, so we put the rain garden at the highest possible point we could. We wanted to make this especially be a vocal study for the neighborhood. This neighborhood especially was ripping down streamside vegetation in Tonquish Creek, and we wanted to show them that there were better ways to protect their creek. So we picked an attractive flagstone edging a wall stone that tied into the bricks of the home and also into the brick style of the wall in the background you can see. And then the majority of the planting is a sedge, sort of like one of those early pictures I showed you. This picture shows it right after it was planted, so the plants are not mature yet. But it will be lovely once they're in. Lastly, here's our third demonstration I'm going to give you. This is the Grown family, another Plymouth Township family. They already had a beautiful foundation planting. The swale in between their house and their neighbors got so soggy they could not mow it until July every year. That would be when it would finally dry out enough that they could actually mow that area. So they had some problems to deal with. And they wanted a rain garden to solve those problems. So we did a bump out rain garden, building on that foundation planting. We built on the existing materials. Michigan boulders were already in use, so we just used more Michigan boulders to define the edge, and we planted it with a beautifully diverse native plant garden to supplement their existing gardens. So great functional landscape that solves problems and looks great at the home. All right, so another big question, what do rain gardens look like? So rain gardens, as we talked about, are very, very shallow. Once they're planted, people don't normally notice the depression. So it's really the plants that most people notice. And there are three major planting styles available for rain gardens. First is lawn grass. If you've got good soil, so not clay, don't do this on clay, you can actually have a lawn grass rain garden. That actually works just fine. So make a grassy area shallowly sloped to a depression and have that depression soak up the rain. Or you can have a manicured style rain garden. Those we typically see happen in the front yard, though not always. This picture is a backyard showing a beautifully manicured rain garden. And then lastly, a habitat focused rain garden. Most of the time, folks think about having those in their backyard, especially so they can relax and enjoy the birds and the butterflies and the bees that they attract and support through their habitat rain garden. But there's no reason you have to have that be in the backyard. This picture is actually a front yard rain garden. It's in the Ann Arbor area, and as many of you maybe know, in Ann Arbor, you can get away with that kind of garden just fine. And of course, there's also a spectrum between habitat focused and manicured that you can work with. It's not an extreme one or the other. But this is kind of ways to think about different ways that rain gardens might look, three major planting styles. Another common question for rain gardens, what do rain gardens cost? The costs can vary widely. If you're doing it yourself, maybe $2 a square foot or so. Primary costs are plants. We typically recommend shredded hardwood mulch and a little bit of compost added into the garden. All of those things you can actually get for free. Gardeners are constantly dividing plants. You can get mulch from tree trimming companies for free, and you can get compost from your municipality. So if you're doing it DIY, you can actually get it for free. If you're hiring a professional, the costs can vary widely. I like to joke with people that you can make, like anything, you can make a garden as expensive as you want it to be. But if you're just hiring somebody to dig a garden that you've designed, maybe $5 to $10 a square foot. Or if you're hiring somebody to do it all, maybe 15 to 20. But as I said, it can cost more than that as well. It's really whatever you want it to be. So it's an incredible spectrum, basically. You can make it work within whatever your budget is. Right. What will the neighbors think? I put that up there. Not many of you, it looks like only two people suggested a concern about what the neighbors will think. But as I mentioned, studies show that this is actually one of the biggest concerns, even for people that are diehard native plant advocates that want to be doing the right thing. They are concerned about what the neighbors will think. And that actually, I think, reflects well on us as a people, right? We're respectful towards our neighbors. We want to make sure that what we do is something that they appreciate. We want to make sure that we're supporting their property values as well. We don't want to be an eyesore in the neighborhood. So this is a very common concern for people, actually. So this picture is showing a front yard in Canton. So actually the same place as the demonstration rain garden evaluation that I'm working with you all on. So this garden had two neighbors that had incredible water issues, as is common in the Canton area, that heavy clay, the area between their homes would fill up with water and would be unmowable for months out of the year. And so they decided they wanted a rain garden to solve it. So here is the after. And so we ended up using a few tricks to make it look like it belongs in the neighborhood. We looked to see what other gardens looked like in the neighborhood. We saw a lot of stacked wallstone. You could already see the three conifer trees that had stacked wallstone around them. And so we just continued within that style that's so common and accepted in that neighborhood. Another thing you can do to make sure your neighbors appreciate it is to keep it as neat as you can. Mostly it's weeding. When people see that you care about your garden, they care about it too naturally. Lastly, if you can add value, everyone appreciates it when you add value to your home because your property value affects theirs as well. So if you can plant a tree, so this is one of the other values of a tree. A mature tree can add $10,000 to the property value, or if you're investing in hardscape as well. Those kinds of things add significant property value. So those are basic strategies that you can use to make sure your rain garden is not just tolerated by your neighbors, but appreciated. Because the reality is that if you're the first person in your neighborhood, you're the pioneer, you're giving everyone else permission to do this too, to solve problems at their homes. I can't tell you how many people I hear from have issues with water threatening their foundations, unmowable lawns, lakes in their backyards. So many people are dealing with water issues, and this is a great solution that you can bring to your neighborhood. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pause for a minute. I've had a few questions come in. Somebody asked about whether there are any good shade plants for rain gardens. The answer to that is yes, there absolutely are good shade plants for rain gardens. They're actually, it's almost easier to plant a shade rain garden than it is a shady space without a rain garden. Dry shade is a really tough environment to work in, but when you add a little bit of water to shade through a rain garden, there's actually more plants that will do okay in that space. Let's see if there's any other questions that I can answer here. About a part of the yard that can flood but can also completely dry out in August, September. We'll get to planting in just a little bit, but rain gardens can handle that kind of condition sometimes. But it's really important to pick plants that are appropriate for the conditions. That's part of the trick in terms of designing a rain garden is forecasting what the conditions are going to be like. If you have a garden that's super wet in the spring, you're probably going to want to pick some of the real workhorse rain garden plants that can tolerate being underwater for months out of the year, but that can also tolerate that drought. Some of our sedges, our native sedges, are really powerful plants for those kinds of conditions. Somebody else is asking about putting a rain garden at the base of a tree. Hold on to that question. I will get it. Somebody else is asking about providing a plant list. Yes, we will provide a plant list. Okay, moving on, we're going to talk about site selection now. So there are so many good places to put a rain garden. It's actually almost easier to talk about where not to put a rain garden. So the key thing to think about is since there are so many good places, make sure you're not causing any harm. The Hippocratic oath of a master rain gardener is do no harm. So look, make sure there's enough space for your rain garden to work. Watch for slopes. It helps to have a flat area for your rain garden. Watch out for any obstacles that you might create. You don't want your rain garden to be an obstacle for people. You don't want people tripping on it. Watch out for any other hazards that might occur around your rain garden, especially underground utilities. And then lastly, you want to watch for emergency overflows. All gardens will fill up and overflow eventually. We're getting 100-year storms all the more frequently. So make sure that when your garden fills up, you want to make sure it goes somewhere safe, not back to your home. So those are some of the key things to watch out for. We're now going to step through a little bit of a quiz. So here is my first sample. So what do you all think? Is there enough space here for a rain garden? I'm going to give you 10 seconds or so. Feel free to type comments in yes or no. I'm not going to do a poll on this one because it's going to be too fast. All right. So I'm going to give you the answer now. Of course not. That is certainly closer than the 10-foot distance from the property, and you can see quite a few utilities in that little strip. So that is not going to be a good place for a rain garden. You want to make sure there's enough space. So not good there. That said, if you're dealing with a tight area like that, and if you have the slope, oftentimes you can pipe the water to where you can have a rain garden. So here's an example of a front yard rain garden that had the water piped underground through that narrow strip out to the front to where there was space. So make sure you're sending the water to where it needs to be. Um, all right, I'm seeing a few folks commenting on the potential audio problems. I will see what I can do to help with the situation by making sure I am talking appropriately. All right, so next up we've got site selection, where to put a rain garden. What do you think about this one? Is this a good space for a rain garden? Oh, right. No, this is not going to work either. You need to be 10 foot away from the house. It's possible that you could pipe it under the sidewalk, into the strip, into the right of way. You'd have to get permission from your community. And also, this one is going to be a little difficult because of the tree there. Next one. How about this space right here? Is this a good spot for a rain garden? All right. So, no, yet another bad spot for a rain garden. We're right next to that tree. Somebody earlier asked about whether or not you could put a rain garden right next to a tree. The answer is no, because we don't want to dig next to that tree. When we dig and damage roots for trees, that can kill the tree, or sometimes the tree will survive, but it will drop a limb on your house or on your car. You do not want to dig next to a tree. So you want to try to avoid digging within the drip canopy of the tree. So that's go to the limits where the branches for the tree extend. Draw an imaginary line down to the ground surface. That is the drip canopy. You do not want to dig within the drip canopy of the tree for safety's sake. Instead, try to pipe that water farther away from the tree if you can. All right, how about this one? What do you think about this one? Is this a good spot for a rain garden? While you're thinking, I just want to give a shout out to Lillian Mahaney on there, one of my old Master Gardener volunteers from Traverse City. Glad to see her on the line. All right, this would be a great spot for a rain garden, right? This is showing that downspout connected to the driveway apron creates those slip hazards. The challenge here, right, is the sidewalk. It's hard to pipe that water over to the green space area. It is, however, possible to trench underneath that sidewalk because it would be great to have the rain garden over there. You can see the air conditioner in the background. It's unsightly and it makes a lot of noise. Sure would be great to buffer the sights and sounds from that air conditioning by building a rain garden in that space. You want to make sure you're keeping it away from the property line 2 feet, but if you can channel under that concrete, and there are a million YouTube videos showing you how to do it, then that would be a great spot for a rain garden. All right, here's another one. What about this one? How does this work for a rain garden? All right. I'm going to say nope. Slopes are too steep here. The way a rain garden works is you want to have as flat of a bottom area as possible. On a slope this steep, it's really hard to get it sized properly. It's not impossible, however. You can practice the time-honored traditional strategy of terracing to create those flat areas for the rain garden. However, I recommend no one start here. This is more expensive and more technically difficult. This kind of rain garden is often best for the professionals. So if you had to, yes, you could put a rain garden on the slope, but it is not the best place to start. All right, next, Miss Dig. So right now, given the stay-home order, Miss Dig is not doing markings for private residences except for, I believe, emergency situations. They do not want to be marking for rain gardens right now. So right now, until Miss Dig starts up again, now is not a good time to be doing a rain garden. Now is the perfect time to be planning a rain garden, however. Plan it for the next month, and then you'll be ready to dig. Hopefully in May or June, you'll be able to Miss Dig again. But you have to watch out. There is an incredible array of underground utilities traveling through our yard, some in the areas we least expect. So Mistig will come and mark them for you. And you want to be careful to avoid those. You don't want to cause damage. If you don't do misdig and you break one of these things, you are responsible for it. You do not want to be responsible. All right, quiz, and I'm going to do a poll on this one. Where to put the rain garden now? So we've talked about some of the obstacles with rain gardens. Which side do you think would be the best side for the rain garden? The left side or the right side? The poll is open now. So put your answer in there. Which one do you think is the best spot for a rain garden here? The poll is open. I will leave it open for, 15, 20 seconds or so, and then I will show the results and we can talk it through. So which side is the best spot for a rain garden? I'm seeing some answers starting to come through now. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see what folks said. We've got 77%. It looks like they're saying the right side. So the answer is actually both. Both are great for rain gardens, but that homeowner through the Master Rain Gardener Training Program built it on the left side of the berm out front. I'm going to go back. Why is that? Well, let's see. There's the downspout right next to those arborvitae, so there's really easy access to get it to the rain garden space. There's tons of open space there for the rain garden to go, so it was an easy spot to build a rain garden. And I recommend that you start at the easiest spot possible. Backyard is a great spot to start, especially because then it is low pressure for you as you experiment, as you try your first rain garden. You can make it as affordable as possible by starting small, as easy as possible, and to give yourself the space to play with it rather than starting in the front area. The right side over here could work for a rain garden. There's a sidewalk that you'd have to tunnel under, which that's not the hardest thing, but it does add some difficulty to it. And the slope is a little bit steeper there. But that said, you could absolutely put a rain garden on the right side there. There's no reason you could not. All right. And oh, somebody pointed out the tree. There is a tree in the foreground on the right side there. Its canopy is coming down close to that rain garden, but the rain garden is outside the edge of that drip canopy. All right, moving ahead. So we're going to get back to that exercise now. We're going to highlight places where you can put a rain garden on this home. So I'm going to pull out my handy dandy little paintbrush here. And normally what I like to do for this is I like to highlight areas outside of the tree canopy cover, open lawn areas. The reality for this is that there is actually a whole lot of space where you can be putting that rain garden. This home looks to be probably a relatively new subdivision. And so many of these new subdivisions, what they end up doing when they're building is they strip off all the good topsoil, they sell it so they can make a profit, and then they come back in and leave you with marginal turf grown on crappy soil. And crappy is the technical term for this kind of garden space. So I am highlighting a whole lot. Most homes that are in urban areas are on much smaller lots and have much tighter spaces where they can be building, and more of a concern about existing tree canopy cover. You can see I avoided the drip edges of these trees, basically the area that is underneath the canopy of those trees. I'm going to make that partially transparent. So you can see this home has an incredible opportunity uh, for rain gardens. There's so much open space available. When you've got this much space, the difficulty is actually figuring out where to put it. When you've got less space to work with, then it ends up getting kind of decided for you as to where that rain garden is going to go. So you can see on here lots and lots of spaces where that rain garden could go. I would also like at this point to highlight opportunities for conservation landscapes, something I mentioned earlier. So space where maybe a rain garden is not ideal, but where you could potentially put just a standard traditional native plant garden or a pollinator garden or a monarch garden, those kinds of spaces. And so oftentimes near the house within that 10-foot area can be a space where you could have that more traditional native plant style garden. So I'm going to highlight some of those areas a little bit closer to the house. As potential spaces for mixed native plant gardens, more of a conservation garden space. Looks like this area back here is a manicured backyard space. I'm seeing a lot of spacing between the plants. Potentially this area could be added to with more density, but it could also be kept as is, depending on the goals for use of the landscape. Maybe there's a reason why the homeowner wants to maintain a manicured space back there. But those are all potential spaces that could be conservation landscapes. So we've got a number of options here. I'm also going to suggest in between these trees right here, and truly under trees as well. Oftentimes underneath existing trees, it can be a little tricky to plant underneath existing trees. There are tips and tricks about how to do it well. That's beyond the scope of this course. But you can oftentimes plant underneath those existing trees, shade-loving, oftentimes drought-tolerant perennials that can survive in those spaces. Over in this area, the hell strip is what this is oftentimes called. X this around. In here, I'm going to put, you could potentially have little rain gardens in this space, although again, these kinds of spaces, the hell strip area is within the right of way. That's typically owned by the community, and you would need permission to be doing something. So that is not the easiest space to be working. All right, so now we've highlighted different spaces within this residence that could be used for different kinds of functional landscapes where we're getting our lawns a job. I'm going to shift back now to our presentation as we continue to step through some of the basic skill sets. We talked about where to put a rain garden. Now we're going to talk about how big a garden should be. What I want you all to come away with here in your heads is the 20% rule. That's your golden rule of thumb that's going to help you to size the rain garden. So step one in implementing the 20% rule is you need to trace out the size of the hard area that's going to drain to your rain garden. So this is showing now a roof area draining to one downspout. And so say you were going to build your rain garden, taking water from that downspout, you would want to figure out the flat area, so not the slope area, the flat area of that roof area. Maybe you're going to tap into a few other downspouts. For each one of those downspouts, what is the area of that hard surface draining to that downspout? This is critical. This is essential information. This is the most important, second most important. Oh, it's tied. Variable in terms of sizing your rain garden is the size of that hard surface. And with this 20% rule, we typically recommend about a 6-inch depth on the rain garden. So here is a plan view, an aerial view of a home showing this. So you can see in the kind of pinkish salmonish color, the roof area that's draining to the downspout. 20% of that, the dark blue area, is going to be the recommended size of the rain garden. And you can see that bottom rain garden is about the size of that 20% of that hard area. This rule of thumb at a 6-inch depth works for the vast majority of rain gardens out there. This tends to be a good size, and when you size it like this, then the recommended plant lists that we have on our website, which we'll get to in a bit, tend to survive well in these kinds of conditions. So for most gardens, this is the sizing you want to work with. 20% of the size of that hard surface at a 6-inch depth. All right. And just to show you what that would be, roughly, typically about as big as a parking space. So for most homes with their downspouts, parking space is about 200 square foot. Most rain gardens end up being about 100 to 200 square feet. So roughly about that big. And to really drive home the proportionality of this, here is one of the smaller rain gardens I know of. The smallest rain garden I've seen was about 1 square foot. This one is just a little bit bigger than that. You can see patio. It's relatively small. It drains to that little strip, and that strip is about 20%. Oh, I see somebody asking if there's a disadvantage in going too big with a rain garden. So there's not necessarily a disadvantage to going too big, other than it gets to be a lot more difficult to dig and a lot more difficult to plant. The bigger garden you go with, the more gardening challenge you're going to be taking on. So that's partially why I recommend going small. And oftentimes, this is a common error that people make. They'll do is they'll look for the wet spot at the very bottom of the property where all their water drains, and they try to do a giant garden down there. That tends to be very difficult to do. Oftentimes, there's too much water. So what I recommend is pick up one downspout. Make it as small and simple as possible, and get as far upstream as you can. In other words, get it up closer to your house, not within 10 foot. You want to keep it 10 foot away, but try to make one garden sized for that downspout and make that one work. And then move on to do another one and another one. So you do a series of small rain gardens rather than one gigantic rain garden. The maintenance for a rain garden over the first 3 years, like any garden, is the most significant time. If you maintain it well for those first 3 years, then the rain garden ends up being a low maintenance space. So you want to make sure you're not biting off more than you can chew. That's a reason to keep it a little bit smaller. I see somebody's asking 6-inch depth of what? Mulch roots. So we'll talk about digging in a little bit and get to that. So hold on to that question. All right, so the 20% rule breaks a little bit depending on your soils. So I want to talk about some extreme soils. So if you have extreme clay soils, especially, then you want to make that garden a little bit bigger. So 30% for your average clay soils, possibly up to 40% for really crazy heavy clay, but 30% typically doesn't. And if you've got that heavy clay and you make the bigger garden, you want your garden to be more shallow. So have that size to a 3-inch depth. So the principle with a rain garden is you spread and you sink the water. So with clay soils where the water soaks in slowly, you have to spread it a little bit wider to make the garden soak in. You want to make it a little bit shallower. That helps to make sure that that water is able to soak in within that goal 24 to 48 hours. And we set that goal for rain gardens because mosquito breeding cycles, it takes about 5 days for mosquito larvae to become full-fledged adult mosquitoes. So if we can soak in that water within 48 hours, then we don't have to worry about mosquito threats. So clay soil, 30%, 3-inch depth. If you have extreme sandy soil, like that Plymouth Municipal Yard garden I showed at the start, you can make the garden potentially smaller, potentially as small as 10%, and you can potentially go even deeper, 9 inches or more. That water will soak in so quickly that it doesn't matter as much if you've got a deeper garden space. Water will still soak in plenty fast. So it's really important to know what your soils look like. I'm actually curious at this point to see how many of you have a sense for what soils you've got. I'm curious whether or not, if any of you know. I expect some of you are not going to know. In fact, I expect most of you are not going to know what your soils are. The reality is most people don't know. But if you're aware that you've got crazy clay soils, or maybe you've got average soils with a little bit of everything, some clay, some sand, silt, organic matter, put yourself in the average category. If you know you've got super sandy soil, and there are pockets of that here in the Rouge, put yourself down for that. We'll get a sense for where our audience tends to fall. I'm going to show the results now so you can all see. Looks like we've got a lot of folks with crazy clay coming back in. So especially those of you with crazy clay, you're going to want to do bigger gardens. And so that's all the more reason to start with the smallest garden you can. Find one of your smaller downspouts. If you've got a couple options to choose from, pick your smaller garden. The good thing is, even though you're making the garden bigger, because you're going more shallow with a clay garden, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be that much more difficult. You just want to be a little more cautious in terms of how you get the plans established. All right. I'm actually impressed by how many of you know what your soils are. That's a little bit higher than I would have expected. That's great that you all have taken the time to learn. All right, I want to pass you all some resources now to find out more about your soils. So I'm going to show you a digital tool for those of you that live in the Rouge to get a sense for your soils, and we're going to take that information and plug it into our demo. You can do an internet search for a soil percolation test is another option. There's lots of ways to do it. In the Rouge, we basically recommend you dig about an 18-inch hole, fill it up with water, let it drain once to saturate the soils, and then fill it up again and time it. If it takes longer than a day for that to soak in the ground, then you want to size it for clay soils. If it soaks in faster than a day, then you should be able to size it with that 20% rule of thumb. So lots of videos on the internet about how to do that, so we'll let you leave it to it. And then lastly, once the stay home order lifts, you can hire me or another of my colleagues at Friends of the Rouge to come out and do a soil boring. We can dig an 8-foot hole and tell you exactly what you've got under your soils there to help you guide your planning process. Okay, I'm going to show you now that soil tool. So let's pull up our address, 42 Woods Drive. This is on the Friends of the Rouge website at therouge.org/map. And you can zoom into your home. Here we go. And I have got, this is something I made a couple years back, and it's got an incredible amount of information you can draw from. It's got land covers circa 1800. So you can see that this used to be a beech sugar maple forest on here. So that's fun information about the background for this area. I also have soils information on here. And so the different colors are showing different information about the soils. So this is based on the soil survey. It's not always correct, but it's going to let us know what we should be looking for. So this is listed as C/D soils. Soils are ranked A, B, C, D. A soils are those crazy sandy soils. B and C soils are our average soils. And D soils tend to be that crazy clay soil or sometimes even a high groundwater table. So we can see here this home likely has crazy clay that possibly has a high groundwater table as well. So we're going to want to be sizing gardens for this home at that 30 to 40% spacing. And the good news is this home does have a lot of space. It's a large home, and so it also is going to be producing a lot of water. So this is a rule of thumb again, and the reality is it's important to check to confirm the soil survey is not close enough in and of itself. All right, so let's see. We're going to do a sample on this home, sample rain garden. We're going to do a backyard space, like I said, because it's good to start in the back, out of sight, for you to try this out, to get your hand at it, to become an expert in your backyard, and then try the front yard. So I'm going to just take a guess. I obviously don't know much about this house or the size of its area. I'm going to use the measure tool to map out the size of an impervious area. I'm going to assume maybe a really downspout. You can see I can just trace out now and get a 900 square foot roof area. So this is a huge section of roof that I've highlighted here. It's probably actually going to not quite be that big. And then if we do the 30% rule, so 10% of that would be 90 square foot times 3, 270 square foot. So because this is a slightly larger than average home, and I'm working with a large roof area, I'm coming up with a larger garden than that parking space example I gave, 270 square foot. I'm going to, just for practice sake, I'm going to just try to draw out roughly what a 300 square foot garden would look like so you can see proportionally. So this is a 323 square foot garden that I just highlighted on here. So something like that. So you can see that fits pretty well within the space here, right? That's a pretty proportional size garden for the amount of turf that's in the space. And that size garden should perform well given the soil conditions for this home. Given that there's space, potentially this homeowner could bump it up to the 40% size even to make it work all the better. I'm going to come back over here. So lots of spaces to be working with for a rain garden, but I think I'm going to focus for the sake of this demonstration to a rain garden back in this area. So something kind of like this is going to be roughly sized. And I put it kind of in the back area here to keep an area of turf grass open, so that way if this homeowner wants to continue to use that backyard for entertainment, for games of any kind, there's some open lawn space there. We've tucked this rain garden in. It's got these adjacent garden spaces, manicured garden spaces. It should fit pretty nicely in that area. Highlight that one in a dark green um, so that we can keep it separate from some of the other garden spaces. There we go. So there is our sample rain garden that we've located on this home, roughly proportionally sized. It fits in well within the space. Okay, moving on. So let's see what's next. Oops, I just clicked on the wrong thing. Moving on. We did that exercise. We're going to get into digging now. Somebody asked, are we going to tell us how to do it? So yes, I'm going to give you an orientation for the digging. And somebody's asking about, is this a digital tool? And yes, I am showing you something of what my digital consultations would look like. The digital consultations would end with a garden design concept for you, sized where you would put it in your home. All right, so digging. I want to give you a sense for the digging strategy for how to go about digging one of these things in the easiest way possible. So this digging image here, this is going to be showing you on something of an exaggerated slope, the easiest way for your back to dig a rain garden. It's called balancing the cut and fill. So the idea is that we start digging the upslope area of the garden, and then we take that soil that we've dug and we pile it on the downslope area. So when we're digging up soils, we're keeping them on site, we're keeping them nearby. That is the most efficient way, that is the cheapest way to build a rain garden, is to balance that cut and fill. If we dig too much, then we've got a problem. We've got soil, we've got to figure out what to do with it. And so if we could put that soil to use by building what's called a berm on the downslope side, that is our easiest way to build a rain garden. And the key is you want to make sure that the bottom area for this rain garden is as level as possible. This image shows one strategy, stakes in the ground with a line that's drawn taut between those stakes and a line level on it. If you do that, then you can use a ruler to measure along the line level the depth of the garden. So that's one way. This strategy tends to break down for really long distances because the line can start to bow in the middle. But for small rain gardens, this works well. There are tons of other strategies as well that you can use. So showing you now, so here is that 3 to 6 inch depth of water within that garden space. So somebody asked me what 3 to 6 inches meant, and so this is what I mean by it. So that ponding area in. On top of this, you'll also want to add in 3 inches of mulch. Shredded hardwood tends to work best because its small interleaving pieces tend to lock together and they don't float away. So if you get those free wood chips from a tree trimming company, those are more likely to float. They're free, so you deal with the consequence. You could pay for shredded hardwood, that tends to work best. If you can dig a little extra, so not just this 3 to 6 inch depth, but an extra 3 inches, and replace that 3 inches with compost that you can rototill in, that can help improve the soils. One of the biggest obstacles that people have if they're not careful, especially this Canton home might be worried about it because there's probably very little topsoil there, is that sometimes people will dig up the good topsoil and then the bottom of the rain garden is poor quality subsoil there. So that's the one thing to really watch out for when you're doing the digging. Sometimes people will dig up that topsoil and set it aside, and then they'll dig extra deep to remove the subsoil, and then they'll put the topsoil back in. So that's a great way to keep good soils on the bottom of the garden. But the final outcome that you want to achieve is going to look something like this: a 3 to 6 inch area for the water to pond, and then it'll overflow down the berm and elsewhere into the landscape. All right, so digging. So what do I do with all this dirt? So say you can't balance that cut and fill, or actually, so what you want to try to do is balance that cut and fill. This is showing on the left side somebody that built a berm on the downslope side of this rain garden to try to balance that cut and fill. The right side is showing that a berm is a time-honored landscaping practice. So say you dig way too much soil up and you've got more than what you need for just the contour berm that showed on the left side, you can make that berm far, far bigger. You can add on a designed landscape berm next to your rain garden. So finding a way to put that soil to use on site is the cheapest way to build a rain garden. It's also the most environmentally beneficial. You're not using fossil fuels to haul that soil away. All right. But that said, if you need to, maybe you've got a tiny, tiny lot. Maybe there's just no space to send that soil. Most landscaping companies have a service. Well, they will drop off a trailer or a roll off that you can fill up with soil, and they'll haul it away for relatively little money. So this is a project that we did in the township. And the landscape company provided us a trailer that could haul 6 yards of soil away. It cost us $125 to haul those 6 yards away. So it wasn't that expensive. There are options available that you can use to haul that soil away if you have to. All right. So, questions. I'm going to see if there are any questions about digging, keeping in mind that we are going to get to planting next. So, if there's any questions, and if there are any questions going back to sizing as well, overview of rain garden or digging, I'll try to answer those questions now. We'll look back through the comments and see if there are any that I can take on. Can you use an existing low area that ponds water? Most of the yard is heavily covered with mature trees. So the reality that I'll mention here, right, is that most of us are dealing with the yards that we have, not the yards that we wish we could have. Some homes have so many mature trees that there is literally not a space that they could put a rain garden. In this example, the homeowner has one low-lying area that ponds heavily with water. The rest of the yard is mature trees. So there's really no other option than to work in that low area. I would much rather that you not work in those low areas. I would rather you build several small gardens upslope closer to your house rather than one giant garden in that low area. Those low areas are more likely to have a high water table in many places in Michigan, which makes them function less well for a rain garden. The water just does not soak in as well. And oftentimes those low areas are getting water not just from your house, but from your neighbors' houses as well. Sometimes those low areas are wet year round for a reason. So sometimes those low areas end up being better planted as wetlands. Some of our rain garden plants verge into the wetland plant lists, but oftentimes those areas are going to be better off with plants that can survive being underwater for years, sorry, not years, for months at a time. To handle those kinds of conditions. So you want to be really aware of what you've got. But that said, with a wetland type garden, that existing low area that's not a wetland, the more plants that you could put in wetland vegetation, what those wetland plants do, the way wetlands get rid of water, is they send the water into the air. So the more plants that you can get surviving down there, the more of the water is going to disappear up into the air through a technical process called evapotranspiration. So plant those wet areas as best you can, and you will help to get rid of the water. You could also look to see if you could plant any more trees adjacent to that low-lying wet area. You probably don't want to plant it in that low-lying wet area, although there are some wetland trees that will survive underwater for much of the year. But the more vegetation that you can get soaking up that water, the better off you're going to be. All right, I'm going to move ahead now. Let's see, what is next? Rain garden plants. I'm sure for many of you, you're at home saying, at last, the Yahoo is finally getting to plants. For so many people, this is where they want to start. But the reason we get to it last is that all the other variables that we worked with, the sizing of the garden, the depth of the garden, the soils of the garden, those details, those variables are going to be what predicts what plants are going to survive in your garden. So if you jump to the plants first, you might pick plants that won't be able to survive in the actual conditions of the garden that you create for yourself. So the thing to understand about rain garden plants is it is a rough life for a rain garden plant. Rain garden plants have to be able to absorb that 3 to 6 inches of ponded water, so they have to handle being underwater for up to 2 days in a row. Many plants cannot survive that. We're not talking about water gardens. So to be very, very clear, rain gardens dry up. They do not stay wet year round. We're not talking about water plants. If you go to a pond store and ask for water plants, you will get plants that probably won't survive a rain garden because rain gardens also dry up. They deal with drought. So if you think about our hot August months where it hasn't rained for weeks at a time, the soils can get incredibly dry. You don't want to have to water this thing. So the rain garden plants have to be able to tolerate both wet and dry periods. Rule of thumb for you when you're thinking through a rain garden is that there are three primary planting zones to think of. So the very bottom of the rain garden is going to be the wettest zone in the rain garden. And with the rain garden plant list I'll send you to in a little bit, it's going to be plants that are in the MSW, so medium, moist, and wet conditions. If you've got a clay garden, it might vary more towards the wet side. If you've got a wetland garden, those wet plants are going to be really the right plants to choose. But if you've got, say, a garden on heavy sand, you might need to have plants on that bottom area that can tolerate drought even. So there's a wide variety of potential conditions. That's why it's so important to know your soils and the amount of water coming in. The bottom tends to be the wettest spot. Next is the side slope. Plants in that area have to be able to handle both drought. It gets dry on that side, but it also gets wet sometimes for a day or two. So plants have to be able to handle both those conditions. And then lastly, the berm next to your rain garden tends to be pretty dry. The berm itself, because it's an elevated area of soil, dries out more than the adjacent areas of garden on your property. So you really want drought-tolerant plants on that berm. I'd also like you to think about the area next to the rain garden as being a planting area as well. Your rain garden doesn't have to be just a rain garden. Sometimes a rain garden looks really great if it has a more traditional landscape planted right next to it. So that's your schema for the types of plants that are going to work in a rain garden. And I'm going to show you a picture now of some beautiful plants that work in that wet zone area. These are mostly native plants, Michigan native plant species. There are Michigan native plants that work for the sun, that work for the shade, and some that are so incredibly versatile that work in both conditions. So the wild iris and the umbrella sedge in the middle will actually handle sun and shade. They will actually handle 3 inches of water for much of the year and drought. So there are some plants that are just workhorses in the rain garden that can handle virtually all conditions. So lots of beautiful, beautiful plants that you can pick from in your rain garden. Now I'm going to refer you to some of the plant lists that we make available. They're at our website at therouge.org/plants. And I'm seeing somebody ask about whether this is going to be recorded. This is recorded. We will share it afterwards. And all of the information that I share is on our website as well. So there are lots of ways you can find this information later on. Our website has the top 20 most reliable plants for rain gardens. So for those of you that are not avid gardeners, that's a good graphic way to look at plants that are going to work. For those of you that can handle plant lists, we've also got a larger printout recommended plant list that provides incredible detail on the plants that have been time tested over 10 years to work in rain gardens in Southeast Michigan. And as I mentioned before, those plants have the soil tolerance listed on them: dry, medium, moist, and wet, as well as a variety of other conditions and just aesthetic experiences that people have had with the plants. Lastly, we have a list that was recommended to us by Christensen's Nursery in Plymouth for traditional ornamental plants that may work in a rain garden. So these are not guaranteed to work, but they might work. And here at Friends of the Rouge, we take a big tent approach to plant selection for rain gardens. We want you to be happy with your rain garden, and we recommend you to pick the plants that will make you happy. Our approach is that if you are happy with your rain garden, if your rain garden looks great, then it's more likely that your friends and neighbors will be copying you. And we want to see a whole lot of rain gardens. So we recommend native plants for rain gardens because of the habitat value that they provide, but we are happy to have any rain garden regardless of the plants that are planted in it. So pick the plants that make you happy. Moving on, I'd like to do a poll now. I showed this at the very start of the rain garden section, the different kinds of rain garden planting patterns that you might pick. So long grass, manicured, or habitat focused. I am curious to see what you all think. So I'm going to do the poll now for that, and we'll see what results come through. So what the audience is looking for in terms of styles. And after this, I'm going to shift into some basic tips for how to achieve that manicured look with your rain garden and some tips for the habitat focused rain garden as well. So I'm going to give the poll another sec here. I'm not seeing any results coming in yet, but I want to give you a chance to put your results in. I might have actually closed it accidentally, so I think I might have just reopened it. So if you tried and couldn't get your results in, try again now, and let's see what comes through. Still not seeing any results coming in, which makes me wonder. There's a result coming in. Starting to worry that I goofed something up somehow. Again, this is our first time doing this, so I appreciate your forbearance as we work through the technical difficulties. Looks like we've got a mix of habitat focus and blended, neat-looking native plants. I added that in there because, of course, there's a spectrum between manicured and habitat focused. And really, it's about finding the rain garden that is right for you. It looks like all right, this audience is really coming in with habitat focus, which is wonderful. That's how you get the most function out of the rain garden, is by having that habitat focus. You're solving water problems and you're providing habitat. And often those Michigan native plants tend to work better for water management as well. Um, let's see. Oh, I've got a question that came in about plant toxicity for dogs. That is a really important question consideration to bring in. I'm going to refer you to the Humane Society of North or of the United States. If you do an internet search for dog safe plants Humane Society, you will find they have a searchable database of plants that are toxic to dogs. And so if you have a dog and you're building a rain garden, I would recommend that as you put your planting plan together, you just double check that the plants that you're picking are not on that toxic to dog plant list. That's really smart to make sure that you're keeping your garden safe for dogs and potentially for kids as well. All right, I'm going to oops, I forgot to show the results in the video. I'm showing those results now. You can see that most people pick habitat focused and some blended, neat looking native plants. So I'm going to move forward. We're going to talk about manicured tips. And so for those of you that are looking for blended, basically apply at least some of these tips for manicured, and that will help you to make your native plants look a little more neat. So my tips for manicured are: reduce the number of plants. Simplify the plant selection as much as you can. That's the number one strategy to make your rain garden look neater. The rain garden on the left was designed by Susan Bryan. It's along Miller Avenue in Ann Arbor. It is a 100% native plant garden that uses two species. So brown fox sedge is creating that ground cover texture, and then it's planted with red maple, Acer rubrum, in the bottom area of the rain garden. This is a rain garden that is handling incredibly difficult conditions, heavy pollution, salt spray, but it survives. And it's beautiful. And it's because it's largely a textural garden that's very neat and orderly. There's the texture, the ground cover texture of the sedge with the boulders that are defining the edges, the small river rocks next to it, and then well-managed turf grass on the next edge. Four neat textures side by side. This garden looks beautiful, manicured, and it is 100% native plant. The right side garden does not have a rain garden in it. But what I wanted to do is show you this obviously highly manicured looking garden. It's got great texture, especially from the boulders to the evergreen texture of the, probably a yew. It's got I think it's a burning bush, an invasive plant next to it. So problems with this garden, but what I'd like you to do is think about framing. I mentioned earlier that you don't just have to have a rain garden. You can have a more traditional landscape next to it. Imagine if behind that yew hedge there was a rain garden. In this neighborhood, most people would not see the rain garden, which I don't necessarily like because I want your neighbors to know you've got a rain garden. But this homeowner could have 5 to 7 foot tall native plants, which many people tend to be leery of planting, and they would look fine because that yew hedge is creating a great facer. It's framing the garden effectively. So again, if you can frame your garden using the landscape language of your neighborhood, it's going to look great, and that's going to help it look more manicured. My last tip, and people don't tend to think about this, but use grasses. So many people approach garden design and they think, I want to get as many different colors as possible, as many different flowers as possible. I don't want any grasses in there. But the reality is, if you can have at least 30% grass, and don't be shy, get up to 70% or even 100% grasses or sedges, those grasses basically create the equivalent of white space. They help unify the entire garden through the consistent texture, and they create an orderly background that tends to look good for 9 to 12 months out of the year. Many traditional native plants tend to look good for about one season and then they flop. Native grasses, however, tend to look good for 3 or 4 seasons. So it really helps to provide sturdy structure for the garden. And then the soft texture of the grass is a beautiful contrast with most standard native plants. So adding grasses in there. And these are tips that I would recommend, especially the grasses for any native plant garden. They really help that garden to look neat and orderly. All right, moving ahead. So now we're going to talk about planting with a habitat focus. So here's a full image of that front yard Ann Arbor garden. This is a garden built by a homeowner through the Master Rain Gardener Training Program. And as I said again, in Ann Arbor, you can get away with gardens that look like this in the front yard. But the keys to keep in mind for maximizing habitat in your rain garden is maximum diversity. So the opposite for the manicure tip I just gave, as many different plants as possible. is going to increase your diversity, and not just types of plants or number of species, but also types. So having some grasses in there too, having some shrubs in there, having trees in there, having evergreens in there, textural diversity, height diversity. In your canopies, we've got a low level with our perennials here. We've got a medium level with it's a rose of Sharon shrub in the background, non-native shrub, so not as good for habitat. And then there's a tree in the background. So having multiple layers of texture will also increase your habitat. So for habitat value, the size, the area, and the diversity are the key variables. So the larger the native plant area, and the more diversity, the habitat space you're going to have. And so why native plants? I want to emphasize for a moment the value, the special value of native plants for habitats. Most everyone is familiar these days with the incredible story of monarch butterflies, the entire population of which migrates from across North America down to Mexico into its overwintering grounds every year to create acres of orange. The orange in that fir forest and the top photo is all monarch butterflies, an incredible concentration. It's an amazing story of a tropical butterfly that colonized North America, and it all has at its core a plant-insect relationship. As we know, those monarch butterflies depend on milkweeds. Milkweeds produce a toxic sap that prevents most insects from eating it, but those monarchs have evolved over millennia to be able to eat milkweeds and to eat that sap without it hurting them. And so there's that relationship there that supports and sustains this essential monarch species. The reality is that many insects are like this, if not most insects, especially caterpillars. This is an example of a double-toothed prominent moth. You can see the backs, the ridges on its back look exactly like the ridges on this elm leaf that it eats. This is another insect that has evolved to eat this elm leaf so closely that its body shape has changed to reflect the plant that it eats. There are so many relationships like this, and the wonderful value of native plants is not just that you're celebrating Michigan, that you're celebrating nature by bringing these native plants in. You're also bringing relationships in. You're bringing ecosystems in, webs of life in by sustaining these insects in your home. And for those of you that are bird lovers, these insects are essential bird food. Songbirds depend upon insects for 95% of the protein needs, of the food needs for their baby birds to rear them to adulthood. Those caterpillars are absolutely essential for the survival of our songbird populations. And as we've planted lawn across most of our urban areas here in the Rouge, we're something like, I think it's about 80% developed at this point with very little habitat. So our homes, and it was 50% single family homes, our homes are an essential site for recreating habitat to support the birds and the butterflies and the pollinators around us. I also want to focus on native bees for a moment. Bees are in decline, native bees especially around the country. Many of our native bees are non-stinging bees, and they have special relationships with native plants. So from the sweat bees on the left, they're beautiful metallic greens, the mason bees, digging bees in the middle, to the carpenter bees on the right side. Many of these specialist bees pollinate specific flowers. They have special relationships again, and so planting these native plants will help support those populations as well. This is a cardinal flower, a beautiful Michigan native plant that works great in rain gardens, attracting a hummingbird. So again, another habitat value that these plants are going to bring. And lastly, I want to show you this picture of a hummingbird clear-winged moth. This is a day-flying moth that hovers around like a hummingbird. If you did not look carefully, you would not realize that it was a moth. And it's another native insect that has a special relationship with native plants. Its caterpillars depend upon specific plants for it to be reared to adulthood. So again, when we plant native plants, we're bringing these amazing relationships into our yard that we can celebrate and enjoy. And I mentioned children earlier. Having these wild spaces in our yards are incredible spaces for children to explore and to enjoy. They help make scientists. So many of our scientists had experiences as children in nature. We need to make sure that we provide similar experiences for future generations. All right, so that is my planting overview. Again, I'm sure you have many questions. My goal is to have provided you with the resources that you need. I'm going to give you more of them coming up in just a little bit so that you can follow through, but I'm hoping you'll come away with enough information that you'll know how to get started. If anybody else has any other questions about anything so far, I'd be glad to take them. take a look. Let's see. Somebody's looking for pawpaws. Pawpaws are on our experimental plant list for rain gardens. They are Great Michigan native wetland plants. They also do decently well in dry areas, so we think pawpaws would do well in rain gardens, but there hasn't been much testing on that yet. That's a great example of a plant that give you extra function. The pawpaw, the Michigan banana, that's a great food to be growing in your yard as well. Oh, wow. I see there's a whole conversation about pawpaws while I was gabbing. All right. That's great. Yeah, that's a wonderful plant. And I've had some pawpaw gelato from Zingerman's, the Ann Arbor area. It's quite delicious. It's a great plant. It's got some specific relationships with insects as well. All right. So I don't see any major other questions. I'm hoping that we've answered most of them so far. I'm going to move ahead. We're almost done. Oh, I almost forgot. Um, Before I give you extra resources, I want to give you the story of a rain garden. So we've talked about all of these different strategies for rain gardens, all these different concepts. I want to give you one person's story. Trisha, who took the Master Rain Gardener course in 2013, who designed and built her own rain garden. I want to show you that not only can this be done, but it can be done by your average homeowner. This is an accessible practice, and it is my job and our job at Friends of the Rouge to help you make it happen. So Tricia started in the wintertime in the course, a snow-covered landscape. She wanted to build it in her front yard space. Through the 5-part Master Rain Gardener course, she stepped through the process to design her own garden, including the shape, the planting plan for the garden. She learned extra strategies for digging beyond what we've discussed today. She felt confident to proceed. Moving ahead, here is her garden as she's dug it out. She hit some tree roots. Those are some bigger roots than would be ideal that she found while she was digging. But you can see that she got that space dug out. She pulled aside topsoil on the tarp because she wanted to keep that good soil, and she used the subsoil for a berm. She got a downpour while she was building the garden, which was a great way to test the levelness of the garden. You can see the water spread equally across the garden area, and that's the best way to ensure your garden is going to soak in well. You can see here the resources she brought in, the mulch and the compost. So she brought in compost to fill the bottom in, and she backfilled with the topsoil that she pulled out. You can see the berm in the distance where she put the subsoil, and then she put that mulch on top of it. She rototilled the compost in because that really helps to get the compost mixed in deep. It makes it easier to plant later on. Here you can see her garden after she planted it the first year. And moving ahead, here it is, year 2 and belong. She got her grass back in there, and grass is a great way, especially to show to your neighbors that the garden is going to be an acceptable part of the landscape. People really look to having turf in the front yard. So talk about getting your lawn a job. We're not saying to remove all the turf necessarily, although certainly if you want to, by all means go ahead, but have a mix in there. Get some functionality in. Get your lawn a job getting a rain garden building. You can see she used boulders to create a swale, a pathway for the water to travel over land. That created another texture to the garden. So it turned into a beautiful rain garden that she built herself. And this is on a much smaller lot than the garden that we've been looking at in the Canton area. All right, moving ahead. So we talked about the challenges. We talked about general strategies to get your lawn a job. We talked about lawns to life with rain gardens. Now we're going to talk about next steps, so extra resources available for you as we move on from this presentation today. I want to make sure that as you leave here today, you know how to get the resources you need to be successful. So first off, I want to let you know about a fun challenge that we've offered, the Rain Smart Challenge. You can find it at therouge.org/rainsmart. So the idea basically is to encourage you to get outside on the next rainstorm, maybe avoid a thunderstorm, the next rainstorm, and follow that raindrop. See where the rain goes and try to make sure it's a pretty big storm so you can really see what's happening, where the water is flowing, where the problem parts are. And if you report that back to us, we've got prizes, including consultation drawings from Friends of the Rouge and from our partners as well. So this is a fun way for you to take your next step, to put what you've learned today into action, and also to share what you've learned with your friends and neighbors, to encourage them to be a part of it as well. We have scheduled the next Master Rain Gardener training program. So if you like what you've heard today and you want a whole lot more of it, you can apply for the Master Rain Gardener training program. We're next holding the in-person class in the Rouge in 2020 in the fall in Southfield. It'll be in October. Um, Also, it's available online for free right now through our partners in Washtenaw County. So you can take the full 5-part Master Rain Gardener training program with far more in-depth information than what we could cover in the short amount of time we have today. And we have that linked from our website, rouge.org/mrg, where you can download and watch those videos of the full Master Rain Gardener training program. It's again free for you to watch, or you can sign up for that Southfield course. Moving on, you can also, if you'd like more time with me to do a one-on-one at your home, you can hire the digital coach, that's me, for a dream design consultation. We've got a new rate starting at $35 for a half an hour consultation to work you through your issues. Or if you know you're going to want to have a digital plan, we've got a $65 full hour consultation option available for you. You can come away with a fully fleshed out concept plan for where to put a rain garden in your home, and we can talk you through the strategies that you're going to need for a tailored approach to building a rain garden at your home. All right. Next, RainSmart resources. So our website, therouge.org/RainSmart's got an incredible number of resources. We've got a Facebook group on there. So if you've got questions you want to ask later on, you can become a member of our Facebook group. You can post pictures and ask questions on there. You can get help from staff at Friends of the Rouge, and we've got 50 graduates of our own Master Rain Gardener training program on there who can help answer your questions as well. And I would encourage you, after you install either a rain barrel or a rain garden, to report at our website. We're trying to track progress towards our big goals for 2025. And soon this year, we're going to have a progress thermometer as well as a map showcasing locations across the Rouge where these practices are. So great opportunities moving ahead for you to be a part of this effort. All right, wrapping up today, I'd love to encourage you, if you like what you've heard today, to go to therouge.org/member to become a member of Friends of the Rouge. Now more than ever, in this time of tight budgets, your support will help invest in a legacy of conservation and stewardship for your Rouge River as we work towards a vibrant, thriving, clean Rouge River at the heart of our communities. We welcome your membership. You can also make your mark as a corporate sponsor supporting efforts if your company is doing that kind of thing, or you can leave your legacy with an endowment. Or if you're just interested in leaving a tip, if you like what you saw today, you'd like to make a donation, we'd love to have your support. You can go to therouge.org/tip to leave a tip, whatever amount makes sense for you, $5, $10. We welcome whatever contribution you can make. And again, that is optional. You do not have to. We encourage you all to make whatever donation you can at your level of giving that makes sense for you. Your support will help support future rain garden programming to help Friends of the Rouge work towards those big goals of 1,000 rain gardens and 6,000 rain barrels. So please take a moment today, if you can, to visit either of those links. All right, I'd like to wrap up at this point. When I wrap up, I'm going to stay on the line for questions. If anybody has any closing questions in the text box, I'll do my best to work through and answer those. So I'd like to close once more with thanks to the Dearborn Public Library and its Big Reads programming for having made this event today possible. I would encourage you to go to their website to see what other digital events are occurring. And I just realized that I actually meant to tell you something earlier that did not come through. Sorry for the pause there. I'd actually like to leave you with one other option for you to be involved with Friends of the Rouge. I think I made a wonderful resource I was going to show you earlier that I managed to hide. Let's see. No, I think I just didn't show it earlier. Yeah, neither of these showed up. Let's see. I want to show you. There's 2 other great ways for you to be involved in Friends of the Rouge. I really want to leave these with you. Bring it over this way. So this Get Your Lawn Job activity today has been a great way for you to be involved in Friends of the Rouge. I would strongly encourage you all just to get outside and have a good time. Nature is open and it is beautiful out there. Friends of the Rouge is running a Nature is Open campaign right now where you can get outside and take pictures. So maybe of you as you're starting to take the Rain Smart Challenge, we'd love to have pictures of you with your umbrella in the rain, or just getting out to walk your dog or ride your bike, or if you're able to make it to the river, by all means, share your pictures with us and we will share them back out to our community to encourage everyone to be healthy, both emotionally and physically, through these challenging times. So to encourage you to be a part of that step. And next, Rouge Rescue, our largest annual event, 2,000 people volunteer every year to make a difference for their Rouge River, is obviously changing this year. We're making it an online competition with tons of activities, 20 plus activities you can do at home or on your walk. So within the stay home guidelines, you can compete against your friends and neighbors across the watershed. I encourage you to go to the rouge.org/Rouge Rescue to learn a little more. And actually, through this Sunday, we've got a teaser game. We're going to have mascots for our teams for Rouge Rescue. And if you want, you can toss your favorite animal out there. And if you get the most likes on that Facebook page, maybe your mascot will represent the Rouge. So great opportunities coming up very soon for you from your own home to stay sane through this stay home challenge and also to stay healthy. So great opportunities coming up. With that, I forgot to give you all information about the door prizes that I mentioned at the very beginning. So my apologies if you left already, if you've been hanging. I'm going to pass this along in the Facebook group to make sure that everyone gets it. If you go to the rouge.org/eval, you will get the post evaluation for this experience. We would love to have your feedback, positive and negative, about your experience to help us grow and learn. Again, this is the first time we've ever done this through a live stream, and so your feedback will help us as we move forward. This is something we would like to do in the future, and we would love to find out what worked and what didn't, what more you were looking for, so that we can make sure that we make this event into a transformational catalyst to drive powerful change, environmental change here in Southeast Michigan, to solve flooding problems, to create more habitat for birds, butterflies, and other pollinators, so that we can make our communities beautiful, resilient spaces with wonderful access to a clean, vibrant Rouge River. Do your part today by filling out that evaluation, and then let us know how we can help you as you work towards your next steps, building a rain garden at home, or other strategies to get you your job. All right, with that, I'm going to see if there are any other questions before I close the presentation today. Let's see, somebody says, I'm the homeowner of the demo property. What do you do when the water table is very high, only 3 inches of topsoil? Dig out some of the clay and replace it with other soil. So high water table is one of the biggest challenges here in the Southeast Michigan area. Oftentimes that soil survey that I showed is wrong when it highlights a high water table, and that's in part because it was done so long ago that the information has changed. No longer is there as much water soaking into the ground, so the water table is not always that high. That said, also, however, the Great Lakes are at their highest point that they've been in recorded history, and that translates inland as well. So when the water tables in the Great Lakes rise, the groundwater table actually also rises traveling inland. And so groundwater is a huge concern. So Lorraine, especially, a soil boring would be a very, very useful thing for you to find out what the actual depth to groundwater table is to help guide your process. The most likely outcome for you is going to be that you're going to want to do that shallow 3-inch feature. So you're going to probably want to dig down about 6 inches or so, backfill with about 3 inches of compost or so, maybe mix in some sharp sand as well, not just compost. That will help the drainage. And then add the mulch on top. And so the final garden would actually look pretty flat, actually, because you'd only have that 3-inch depth and you'd be putting in 3 inches of mulch. And so the reality is that the garden will not look like it has ponding water for most of the time. And you're probably going to want to plant it with some pretty robust wetland style plants. So plants like the brown fox sedge or the umbrella sedge, the blue flag iris, some of our other rain garden plants or outright wetland plants that are incredibly resilient to significant ponding water. If you do have a very high water table and you're sending it a significant amount of water from your roof, there's a possibility it's going to stay wet for much of the spring season. So you want to pick plants that can survive those tough conditions, and you want to make sure you don't dig it too deep. If you dig too deep with that high water table, what you're likely to have is standing water. You're going to have a pond, basically. That's how people get ponds, right? They dig down to the water table and then they have a pond. So that's the kind of thing you're going to want to watch out for. That said, that's not necessarily a problem, though, right? If you dig the garden along the lines of what I just mentioned, those wetland plants are going to help pump the water up in the air by keeping it shallow. Even with a relatively high water table, there's a good chance it's going to drain. And if you really wanted to, you could make it all the more diverse with multiple levels. You could have the majority of the garden be that 3 inches deep. If you wanted, you could dig much deeper. You could dig a foot deeper and make something of a pond and plant it with a diversity of Michigan wetland plants. And then in that case, you would end up creating a much more diverse habitat space because you've got plants that can handle a larger variety of conditions. And if you're planting that kind of space with wetland plants, it would be much more likely to attract dragonflies, especially mosquito predators that are going to be able to help manage mosquito conditions. The reality in most urban areas is mosquitoes are a factor because people leave buckets out. They leave um, uh, clay pots for their plants out with the saucers that have water that stays standing in them. The asphalt or concrete itself doesn't dry. There's all these hard surfaces that don't drain that get mosquitoes. So most urban areas have mosquitoes. So if you can, through your high water table conditions, build not just a rain garden space, but maybe also more of a pond space in there for more diversity, then you're going to create a more functioning habitat space that's going to be able to handle those mosquitoes better. So those are a few strategies that I'd recommend you might think about in that space. And you've got a whole lot of space to work with, is the good news with your home. And so something like that would work well in your situation. Let's see if there are any other questions. Sump pump. Let's see. What if a sump pump is frequently pumping into the yard? Any thoughts how to address? Sump pumps are very interesting to think about in conjunction with a rain garden. The thing that I want you to think and keep in mind though is that different sump pumps are working different rates, and it's really the amount of water that sump pump is putting out that's going to be the key. So people especially have high groundwater tables. Your sump pump might be going all spring season, sending a ton of water out. That amount of water is going to keep the garden space wet for so long that it's not necessarily going to dry out like a rain garden would. So sump pumps can often be associated more with wetland style gardens, gardens that do not dry out like rain gardens do. So you might need to have a much more water tolerant plant palette with that sump pump. That said, maybe your sump pump doesn't have that much of a water issue. Maybe it would make sense to tie it into the rain garden if you have enough space, especially. So it's just really going to depend on your conditions there. But I would definitely caution you before sending that sump pump water into the rain garden space to make sure that you're not going to be flooding that rain garden so much that it's not going to soak in time. If you are flooding that rain garden space, then it might be a different plant palette that you would need to pick to be able to survive those wet conditions. Um, what I am looking to do in my home, I'll give you some of the background on my home because I bought not too long ago and haven't had a chance. I'm going to be making one garden that is my sump pump garden, and it's going to be more of a wetland plant list. And then it's going to overflow into more of a traditional rain garden space. It's going to take my roof water. So I'm going to be pairing multiple kinds of gardens together. Let's see, are there any resources out there for wetland style gardening? So that is actually not something that I've had the time to add to our website yet, unfortunately. There are resources out there for wetland style gardening. Probably the most homeowner friendly one is through the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership, which is a wonderful program of MSU Extension. It's largely focused on lakefront property owners, how to create a natural shoreline. So instead of a hardened edge, so a native plant edge that's creating habitat space, that's improving lake water quality. That program has a really wonderful plant list that shows you plants by different planting zone. And as a part of that, they're going to show you wetland plants, basically. They're going to work in shallow water, right on the edge of the lake, or just upstream from that. So it's going to give you a great list of plants that can survive in the wetland conditions. And last I checked, I think it's a searchable list as well. It's actually a really useful list. So that is my go-to recommendation for wetland style gardens out there, at least in terms of the wetland plants that might be able to work. In terms of the actual planting design for the garden, I would use a lot of the similar principles to what we discussed in terms of how to whether hit a habitat goal, adding as much diversity as possible, or if you're aiming for more of a manicured garden, reducing the diversity. All right. Thanks to my colleagues for providing the link to the evaluation. I appreciate that. And there, thank you for passing along that Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership link. I appreciate that. All right. Looking through the comments to seeing some folks say the link isn't working. I'm really glad that somebody got the link to work as a result. Let's see what else we've got. Irma. Irma commented about rain gardens to the rescue. Foolish me for not mentioning that earlier. I will work on that for next time. Friends of the Rouge has long been partnering with the Sierra Club, an incredible partner to provide rain garden programming in the city of Detroit area. And foolish me, especially any Detroit residents that are interested in a rain garden are welcome to apply. I believe the application period is open now to be a part of that wonderful program. You'll get quality rain garden education to help you design a rain garden at home, and your rain garden will be funded. You will be able to build it yourself with your fellow classmates who take the program. It's a wonderful resource. Woe is me for not having mentioned that wonderful resource earlier. We will make sure that we pass a link to that along to the Facebook page. So hopefully we can get that link to any City of Detroit residents. My apologies for omitting that earlier. Let's see, looking back up for other questions. I have actually no way to tell, it seems, how many people are actually online still. So it could be that I'm talking to an empty room, but I would like to continue to talk as long as I see questions. Oh, thanks, Lily, for the plug for Friends of the Rouge. I really appreciate having you on here. It's great to hear from you. Miss you guys up north. Let's see. I'm not seeing any other comments that I can answer here. And we are getting close to that 2 hour mark. So I am gonna hold on. We've got 3 more minutes until the video ends. So I am gonna keep it open just to see if any other questions might come up. And no, I am gonna, let's see, flash back to my vain self so you can see my face rather than that silly slide. Let's see. There we go. All right. Bert, you're still on. 61 of you still on. All right, so we're not empty. That's great. Yeah, let me know if you've got any questions. Oh, what about fertilizer? All right, so question about fertilizer. So I didn't get into that specifically so much. Fertilizer is a large negative impact to water quality, right? Because so many people apply it at the wrong time. They apply it in massive quantities because people think, if a little bit's good, then probably a lot's even better. And so that fertilizer ends up running off into our lakes, rivers, and streams where it causes a large water quality issue. It's excess nutrients that are causing the toxic algal blooms in Lake Erie. Nutrients from our fertilizers are historically a part of that. They're a little bit less so of an issue now because state law has made it so that you can't have phosphorus in fertilizer unless you've got a soil test that proves your need for it. So that's made fertilizer a little bit less of an issue, but people still abuse and overuse it. I like to think about fertilizer as like putting your lawn onto like an IV drip feed, right? People who abuse their lawns by scalping it low, by compacting it, by driving on it, um, and who aren't maintaining the organic matter, they're not mulching the leaves in there. That lawn is on a drip feed, right? You got to add that fertilizer on there to keep it alive. And that fertilizer is causing problems. It's expensive for one thing, and it's also running off into our lakes, rivers, and streams and causing problems. So the goal would be that people start practicing those basic healthy lawn care practices. That reduces the need for fertilizer. You don't actually even need fertilizer at all. If you're mulching those leaves back into the lawn, you're mulching your lawn clippings back in. So it's a great way to save money and, hey, maybe start saving up your budget for your future rain garden. So a little bit about fertilizer. Let's see. Somebody asked for the Facebook group link. Follow the page but can't find the group. It is. Let's see if somebody's put it up there. I will see. Oh, now the video is being interrupted constantly. I don't know why that might be. I will see if I can find the Facebook group to share. Groups, train start. See the group, and we are ending. So long. Oh, wait, actually, let's see. That looks like it did not auto end like I thought it would. Well, we have hit the 2 hour mark. So with that, oh, you know what? It closes at 4 o'clock. Oh, so much to learn about Facebook live stream. It closes at 4 o'clock. It doesn't close at the 2 hour mark because I started a little bit early. We'll stay open till 4 o'clock exactly, just in case there's any questions that come in. Thanks, Lily. Have a wonderful day. You're welcome, Rod. Glad to support. Karen, Joni, Tracy, Bert, glad to support you all. Valerie and David, thanks so much for joining us today. Teresa. Oh, I just got one request from somebody to join the Rain Smart Gardening group. That's exciting. Glad to have you all on there. And that is a wonderful place to ask questions and get them answered. And I'm very, very glad to schedule any digital consultations with anyone who's interested here. I'd love to support you in your efforts to Rain Smart your home. All right, we've got about a 1 minute countdown until the video ends. This is your last chance to get any questions in. I'm going to start bidding you all a wonderful day in anticipation of the video ending. Thank you again for joining us. It does look to be a beautiful day out there. Thank you for taking time out of your beautiful day to be with us here today, to get yourself started down the road towards becoming rain smart, towards solving problems at home, to protect your property against flooding, also to create habitat for those birds, those butterflies, those essential pollinators. They're so crucial not to our food supply, but to our quality of life. It's wonderful to have gardens that are four-dimensional, not just three-dimensional beauties, but also alive. So thank you for taking those steps with us here today. It's been a pleasure having you. With that, I'm going to end the live video. I hope you'll stay in touch. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any future questions or if there's any other way that I can support you in your efforts. Thanks one last time to the Dearborn Library for its support of this event. Wish you all a beautiful day.